This week on the short game, okay, Grabbin' Gary, it's hero time. Welcome to The Short Game, a weekly panel discussion about great storytelling and craft in video games that you can probably finish in less hours than you've got fingers. I'm your host, Raygan Kelly, and I'm joined this week, as always, by my best bro host, Shane. Describe yourself, Shane.
I don't really like that shtick.
You don't like that shtick?
I'm sorry,
That's my shtick.
It's not a good shtick.
Don't you think we need to set the scene for our listeners so that they can picture in their minds what twin gods they now hear?
Why don't you just ask, what are you wearing?
Well, what are you wearing, Shane?
Jeans.
Wow! All right. Well, you and I have that in common.
And a t-shirt.
Among other things. We are here this week to discuss Double Fine, and in particular, their fantastic recent adventure game, Broken Age. Double Fine, for those of you who might not be truly acquainted with their history and with their leader, if you will, Tim Schaffer, is a really amazing game company. It was founded in about the year 2000. By Tim Schaffer, who is a really, really important game designer to me. Shane and I were talking about this a little bit earlier.
Absolutely. His games from LucasArts really formed some of my most memorable gaming experiences when I was a kid. Especially the Monkey Island games, and without a doubt, the Day of the Tentacle games. Some of these games came along a little bit earlier than I really began as a gamer or had access to this kind of thing. But right up until the release of some of the later ones, I think the latest one was probably Grim Fandango.
Mm-hmm.
Those are games that just stood out to me as very, very different from the kind of games that were being released at the time. They were so very much focused on characterization and story, whereas most other games at the time, great games though they were things that were focused on, mechanics or graphics or creating a beautiful 3D world or creating a great arcade-style game. And all of those are great and noble things, but storytelling through games is something that always really stood out to me, and nobody does it like Tim Schaffer does it.
Tim Schaffer started his career at LucasArts. I mean, I don't know much about his work before that, but my understanding was he was pretty close to fresh out of college when he got hired on at LucasArts. He sent in his resume to them and bugged them enough that they hired him. And he worked on the original Maniac Mansion, which is incredibly famous for being one of the first really great adventure games that also featured a lot of humor. But he worked on that game and kind of worked his way up towards being the co-designer of the original Monkey Island game, Secret of Monkey Island, Monkey Island 2, and also co-designed Day of the Tentacle, which was the sequel to Maniac Mansion.
Yeah, Day of the Tentacle was the first one that I played, but I know that Maniac Mansion really set the prototype for adventure games, and really set up a lot of the code or the engine it was reused for almost all of the early adventure games from LucasArts.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to play any of these games, and you should, it's pretty hard to get your hands on them in a really legit way these days. As I think you may be able to pick some of them up on Good Old Games, or maybe on some of these other services, but essentially the way to play these games today is with it's not technically correct to call it an emulator, but it's close enough. It's
a virtual machine.
So yeah, it's a virtual machine emulator type app called SCUMVM, SCUMMVM, which is emulating or re-implementing the engine behind all those early LucasArts games. SCUM, I think, stood for, what was it?
Something like source code for Maniac Mansion, or like...
Yeah, something like that. The MM is for Maniac Mansion. And all of it was building on the really pioneering ideas behind Maniac Mansion. Tim Schaffer, as I understand it, was a little late to be really truly formative in the creation of Maniac Mansion. I think he came into Double Fine when they were working on the Nintendo port of Maniac Mansion and worked on that.
He came into, not Double Fine, to LucasArts.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, he came into LucasArts. And LucasArts at that time was turning out all sorts of amazing original content. Some stuff based on existing Lucas properties. Obviously, they had like the really excellent Indiana Jones point-and-click adventure game, but primarily they were doing new stuff. They had the Monkey Island games, the Day of the Tentacle games. Later on, they had Full Throttle. I think that may have been the first game that Tim was the lead designer on, or the director of, or whatever the phrase is. Full Throttle was really cool. It was a sort of biker-themed point-and-click adventure game.
Oh, yeah. It was excellent.
Very funny. Had the standard point-and-click adventure style, but incorporated a lot of other elements, too.
The interesting thing about that one, to me, is that it was the first time where what up to that point had been a very defined genre of point-and-click adventure, which we haven't fully explained. It's a game style in which you're presented with scenes, and you move your character around by pointing and clicking with a mouse. It's a very computer-oriented game style. And you also collect items for an inventory, and it was very much based around puzzle solving, where you would find items to complete puzzles. You would click on items and perform actions. So, especially in the earlier games, there were lots of specific actions. It grew out of the text adventure genre, where you would be typing things like go left, look at the door, move up, things like that. And in the point-and-click adventure games, you'd have a menu of actions, and you would choose an action and then click on an object in the world.
Mm-hmm. Or often you would have your inventory, and you would use inventory items on things in the world. So, for example, in one of the Monkey Island games, you might have your rubber chicken with a pulley on it, and you'd find that somewhere in the game and think, what on earth do I do with this? How is this going to relate to anything in the game? And somehow later on you'd find some way to incorporate that with maybe some other objects and use that to solve some puzzle or accomplish something really cool. And that was really where Tim Schaffer and LucasArts games really shined, was that it wasn't just, oh, I need to find a hammer because I need to pound some nails. It was really inventive, funny, clever puzzles that weren't obvious, but also had sort of a bizarre internal kind of cartoon logic to them. Really, really fun games to play. So if you at all can, you absolutely should pick up and play Day of the Tentacle. Doesn't take a long time to play. I think you might class this as a short game. And it's still playable today on almost any device using that Scum VM software we were talking about earlier.
So let's talk about Tim leaving and founding Double Fine and what Double Fine's all about.
Sure. And my understanding, and I don't have a great deal of insight into what Tim Schaffer was thinking in the year 2000, but my understanding was essentially he wanted to make Psychonauts. That was his reason for leaving. And I know, Shane, Psychonauts is a game that we've both played and really liked.
Absolutely. Psychonauts is a game that I think shows that Schaffer was kind of branching out. When I mentioned Full Throttle being not strictly an adventure game, Full Throttle started to branch out into a adventure game plus driving and action elements. And I think that's where Tim Schaffer really started to look at other genres and how he could interpret his ideas about character and story into other gameplay mechanics and other genres of gameplay. And Psychonauts is really, in my mind, a perfect modern platform adventure game. There's a complete synthesis of the kind of hunt and fetch and solve puzzle elements of an adventure game and the action-based platforming elements of a platformer.
Plus phenomenal humor, which is always sort of Tim Schaffer's hallmark.
Oh, yeah, it goes without saying. Goes without saying in this kind of game. That game, if you haven't seen or played it, is based around the idea of a summer camp for psychics.
and a bunch of little kid psychics diving into the minds of other people and experimenting in their brains, and each person's brain is a different platform level. Really fun game. And you can pick that up today on Steam. There's a great PC port of it that has been continually updated to work really well on modern stuff. I think it originally came out on PlayStation 2 and probably some other platforms in that era.
You know what? Stop. Just stop listening. Go play Psychonauts.
No.
Come back later.
No. Finish the show.
No.
And then play Psychonauts. All right, do whatever.
So,
whatever you want.
Double Fine is a company that he founded after leaving LucasArts in 2000. Some of their great games, they began with Psychonauts. They followed up with Brutal Legend. Is that right?
Yes, which I have not played. Have you played Brutal Legend?
I have not played it either. I am looking forward to it. I've never found
it's sitting in my Steam library. I picked it up in some kind of a bundle a little while ago. Now, that's not to say it's not attractive, but so it's kind of a weird game concept. Reading about it, my understanding of it is that it's actually kind of a combination of an action game and an RTS, like a real-time strategy game. Like a real-time strategy game designed to be played with a controller. And the theme looks really fun. Your central character is like a heavy metal roadie.
Heavy metal.
I think Tim Schaffer really likes heavy metal roadies. He kind of looks like one. Just a little bit. He's a little more clean cut.
And it's voiced by Jack Black.
Yeah, actually. Who's also in Broken Age. Anyway, that looks really cool, but I have nothing to say about it apart from that it looks like a really cool game. There's also a PC port of it on Steam, and I'm pretty sure that one made it to the Xbox 360 and the PS3. Is that correct?
Don't know.
Anyway, that game I have not played. Hopefully we'll get a chance to play it someday soon. But Psychonauts was a huge critical success, and I think it was a pretty moderate commercial success. But Brutal Legend was a critical success, not quite on the level with Psychonauts, but, people liked it. But I think commercially it didn't do quite so well. And so what happened was that they had been expecting to, and in fact they'd already kind of been lined up to do a second Brutal Legend game. They had begun planning for it, and they were already working on it in some way. And then their publisher kind of pulled out and told them that they were not going to get greenlit to do Brutal Legend 2.
Ouch.
So that left the company kind of looking for their next project without anything really in the pipeline. And so Tim Schaffer went back to something that he had implemented as a kind of an internal way of blowing off steam within the company and a way of kind of developing people within the company. Prior to this, they'd already had a kind of a tradition that's now kind of famous in the game industry called Amnesia Fortnight. And the premise there would be that once a year for 2 weeks, a fortnight, the team at Double Fine would forget whatever they were doing, whatever project they were working on. In this case, it was Brutal Legend, the original one at the time. And they dropped all of that and broke into smaller teams and created prototypes for games that excited them personally. So out of that, they had a lot of, only partially developed internal prototypes for games that got kind of interesting concepts.
Yeah, this is always really interesting to me personally. I think the cool thing about it kind of reminds me of Google's 20% time. Mm-hmm. And I know this kind of thing is not completely uncommon in the tech industry, but it kind of takes the idea of like an indie game jam and it sort of does it within an existing company, and the results have been really interesting.
This kind of concept, though, actually, I think sort of predates the popularization of the idea of the indie game jam. I think this, in some ways, kind of predates that concept.
Oh, really? Okay.
We're talking about like 2002 or 3 or something. I don't know exactly where this is, but that very first Amnesia Fortnight, a lot of games came out of that eventually saw production because the company had no major sort of AAA status games in the pipeline. Costume Quest, which I loved and I just beat recently and I think is a fantastic little cute RPG. Stacking, which is a kind of an adventure game but with a really, really bizarre concept where your characters are all little Matryoshka dolls that can jump into and stack within one another. There were a few other games as well, things that maybe are a little less exciting to me personally, but there was a game that eventually developed into a Sesame Street game that they released commercially and apparently made some money on, and something called Iron Brigade, which is some kind of mech game that unfortunately I know almost nothing about. But in any case, that game jam allowed them to have a pipeline of concepts and game designs and even prototypes ready to go, and small teams within the company ready to produce them, that let them make these smaller, more focused little games that were distributed as downloads rather than as big disc publication productions, which I think really changed the shape of the company.
Yeah, it's made them profitable again.
It did, and it essentially turned them from what was, I wouldn't necessarily call them like a AAA type of company, but they were a company producing big games. But they did this, and suddenly they were essentially an indie game company. They were producing these games on a totally different scale from what they had been doing before, and they were finding success with it. They were producing these little games. So that was such a huge success that they eventually ran a Kickstarter campaign. This is something that is probably a little bit famous already in the games industry, but basically...
Yeah, if you're into games, you probably heard about Double Fine Adventure. The long and short of it is that they went to Kickstarter. Tim Schaffer, who, he's a relatively famous face in the gaming industry, he went directly to his very passionate fans, and he said, fund an adventure game. Everybody wants me to make an adventure game. Let's do it. They managed to pull in a absolutely record-setting Kickstarter over $1 million.
No, over $3.5 million.
Over $3.5 million.
It was at the time by far the biggest Kickstarter campaign to date. At that time, and it still stands as one of probably the top 5 or something. It's really up there. So, and I think that was a really cool thing because essentially he had been wanting to go back to this old form that he'd started in, adventure games. It's what
I think
he was
his
famous
fans
for.
wanted him to go back to that.
Yeah, people had been essentially begging him to, but working within the previous, the model that he'd been working in previously, that wasn't possible because publishers didn't want to publish one of these games. First of all, they're not popular on consoles. They're really only popular on desktop PCs because
you have to point, also click.
Exactly.
Now, I think that they've got a big chance to come back on tablets, and I think we could talk about that more as we talk about Broken Age. But they're definitely not a game style that's popular on consoles because Ada, shut up.
Shut up, Ada. Hey, that's
Listening
our third.
audience.
That's our third co-host for the week.
This is my dog Ada.
Nate, by the way,
has turned into a dog. And we've renamed him Ada.
Yes. No, Nate's out. Nate has a cool rock band, and they are performing a show tomorrow night, so he's at band practice. How cool is that, right? We're the two losers who are sitting at home on a Thursday night recording a podcast while Nate is out playing with his band. God.
Nate, you're too cool for us, Nate.
Way too cool for us.
I can rock and roll, but, I don't.
Can you now?
Yeah.
So anyway, Double Fine ran this Kickstarter campaign without a game concept in mind. They hadn't begun production. They didn't have anything to show for it. Essentially, all they had was Tim Schaffer's face on a camera saying, I would like to make another adventure game. And I don't know what they asked for. I think it was something like $100,000 to do it. He said it's going to be a quick little thing. We're going to bang it out and we'll be done with it by October. I think that their initial plan was to be done with it in under a year. And for it to be a really small production. But obviously the fan response to the game was just insane.
I think there was some element to the Kickstarter where they said they were going to make a documentary and stuff that too.
Yeah, that was really cool. They
I never actually caught up on that element of it.
I saw quite a bit of it. Long story short, they had a film crew come in and film them making the game. And Tim Schaffer, to his credit, is a really funny guy on camera, so it's really fun to watch. But basically, it's just a long video of the production of the game.
just 2 hours of people over the shoulder while they type code.
And fascinating code it was.
Tim Schaffer, you just made $1 million in 24 hours. What are you doing?
I gotta make a game. Story about a boy and a girl, and they both have two different parallel stories going on, and the player can jump back and forth between them. A young girl who's been chosen for this big honor that she finds out is actually being sacrificed to a horrible monster in order to save her town. And her story is about choosing to break out of that arrangement. And then the boy has grown up alone on a spaceship that takes care of his every needs and creates entertainment for him and takes care of his food, his health, and everything, but he's all by himself out in space.
Do you know how to repair hexapals?
As long as it is safe and free of conflict.
That sounds like a no.
I just escaped the Maiden's Feast, and now Mog Chathra is going to eat the town. You what?
While you've been drifting through the universe, war has been raging across the galaxy.
War? Between who?
So the Kickstarter campaign launches, makes an unbelievable amount of money, but then it's a year and 10 months and 15 days before they release the game. And they don't even release the whole game. So we are really today talking about Broken Age Act 1 or Part 1. That is a little frustrating, but Tim Schaffer's decision was to because the game sort of exploded in popularity and they had this enormous amount of funding, I think they also really dramatically expanded the scope of the game. So they hired more and better voice actors. They put a larger team on the game. The length expanded. I think they kind of intended to kind of up the quality of the game quite a bit. And with all of that, the game really took a lot longer than they were expecting. So here we are in 2014, and the first part of the game has been released, essentially the first half. And we're not talking really about episodic content. We're really talking about the first half of the game. Fortunately, the way the game is structured, it ends on a good note, and I feel like it feels like a reasonably complete experience as is. But anything we talk about today, we're talking about only part 1. So if you're listening to this as a lucky listener in the distant future when the full game has been released,
How's that flying car?
yeah, how is that doing? They should be releasing it sometime before the end of the year, this year, but that's all we really know. They don't have a specific release date yet. I would assume it's probably going to be in the latter half of 2014, or they would have said something already, but who knows? But the game...
I don't know, man. They took their time with this part. I think they'll take the time with the rest.
Well, I don't think it's like they're not starting from scratch. They already have art assets. They've written their engine. The team is already assembled. I'm sure they've even got, they've finished the story. So I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as long a wait for part 2 as it was for part 1. But it is a little bit difficult to sell somebody on the proposition of this game. That said, with adventure games, there's a lot of other companies, Telltale in particular, doing adventure games now, and a lot of them are releasing them as episodic content. So I actually think that form really works well for this type of game. So I don't hold it against them, and in fact, I really, really enjoyed the game in the form it's in, and I can't wait for part 2. So
absolutely, I can't wait either. I think they should not make us wait, but
you tell them.
I won't.
So let's dive in and talk about Broken Age then.
Yes. It is such an interesting game to me. Like what I'm looking for when I want to play a adventure game is beautiful hand-drawn style or cartoon style artwork. I'm looking for interesting characters. I'm looking for out of this world situations and scenery, and this game really delivered all of that to me. I'm also looking for puzzles that give me that kind of sense of an aha moment.
Mm-hmm. And
this game didn't really give me that, but we'll see, I think, in the second part, maybe.
We'll talk about the difficulty in a second, but to kind of... I kind of agree. A lot of the puzzles in this game were fairly easy. But in a typical adventure game, the puzzles do sort of increase in difficulty as you approach the end of the game. And because this isn't truly episodic content. It's more the first half of a game. I have a feeling that the puzzles we're building in difficulty and that they will be a bit more tricky and mind-bending in the latter half, or perhaps not, and I suppose we'll see.
Yeah, I do hope so. If not, I think even making this game one that is easy is probably a good strategy to build the audience for this type of game. But that would disappoint me a little bit. I would love to see a little bit of those more of those aha moments where things really come together. Let's talk about the story of the game. The story of the game is kind of a two-story system that's really interesting.
Yes, and of course I don't want to spoil
character...
anything before we hit the spoiler break. So I guarantee you, listeners, that we will not be spoiling anything that you wouldn't see in essentially a trailer for the game before we warn with the spoiler break.
Okay, absolutely. I will try to withhold my spoiler instincts. But yeah, when you start the game up, you're choosing between the two main characters. You can choose either right there at the beginning of the game.
So we got two characters living in apparently entirely different worlds. When you boot up the game, you see Shay, who is a young boy, maybe a teen, sitting on a spaceship of some kind. And also Vela, who lives in a kind of a fantasy world, very agrarian, lots of trees, that kind of thing. So you can choose to play either one. And one of the really interesting mechanics of the game is that you can switch back and forth between the two at will. There's no... you just open the inventory screen and you'll see a nice little shining face of whichever other character it is. And at any point in the story, you can switch back and forth. And no time is lost. So you can... what's really been great about that is that if I got stuck on a puzzle, which did happen a few times, it gives you something to do, while you kind of wait and let that stew in your mind a little bit. And usually I'd go and play the other character a little while, and then by the time I got stuck on that character, I would have had a little bit of a brainwave and head back to the other character, and I'd get right through whatever it was I was stuck on.
Yeah, I think I kind of stuck with each character for a big chunk of time as I played it. I would kind of get from one area to another and then switch characters. But it's nice that you're able to kind of feel it out any way you like, and there's no wrong way to play it. You could conceivably complete the entire game as one character and then turn right around and complete the entire game as the other.
And I think it should be said, though, that unlike some of his previous games, like when I first heard about this character switching mechanic, I immediately thought of Day of the Tentacle, because Day of the Tentacle has this character switching mechanic. You're controlling 3 different characters, but you're controlling them more or less all at the same time, and you actually use all 3 characters to solve the puzzles. I wouldn't say it's quite like a Lost Vikings kind of thing, but there's certain characters who have different capabilities, and you kind of need all 3 to solve the puzzles in the story. They're all in the same world. But in Broken Age, the characters, at least so far, don't really interact in any way that I can perceive. So you are really playing 2 separate games simultaneously and switching back and forth between them at will.
I'd like to see it in part 2 give us some of that element where you can use that as a puzzle solving mechanic. I think it's safe to assume, even as someone who begins playing the game, that they won't keep these 2 plot lines completely separate for the duration of the game. So I feel safe saying that pre-spoiler horn, but you could bleep me out if
I think that's fair.
You feel like there's it's different from previous point-and-click adventure games that I've played in the past, mechanically.
Yeah, in a few ways. And I've heard some complaints about that. I'm sympathetic to them.
It has no actions that you take. It just assumes an action based on what you're clicking and what you're doing, and you can click and drag objects onto people or things in the world to use that object on another object. But it was never even clear. There was a point in the game at which I had to combine 2 objects, and that would have been an action in a previous adventure game, and I suppose it should have been obvious to me that I should just drag one object onto another object right in my inventory. But it's that kind of thing, that kind of difference between the old school games and this one that sometimes threw me for a little bit of a loop, and also made the game feel a little bit more simplistic.
Well, here's where I think all that comes from. This game was designed from day one, I believe, to be available on Macs, PCs, Linux, and also tablets, both Android and iOS. It's not actually out on those touch devices yet, but everything about the interface, from the inventory screen to the way the interactions work, everything about it seems designed for touch. So, for example, the fact that all of those actions you were describing are more contextual. In something like Monkey Island, you would have a menu of things. You'd have a look. You could click on something to look and examine it, or you could click on something to interact with it. And usually that would be like a right and left click. And you could also click to select an object, and your cursor would become that object, and you'd then click to interact using an object. Whereas in Broken Age, it's a drag and drop kind of interaction. So I think a lot of those elements that to a seasoned player of adventure games might seem a little bit simplistic or frustrating are actually just sort of byproducts of the fact that they were designing this to be a multi-platform title, and probably the place where, in the long run, this game will see the most play is on iOS or on tablet interfaces.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great game on a tablet. It's going to look beautiful on a smaller screen like that. The art style, to me, just is better than just about any other adventure game that I've played, save for Grim Fandango, which to me had just one of the most unique and interesting art styles of any adventure game I've played.
True, although this is 2D, really beautiful, painterly pictures, whereas that was a three-dimensional game, so that was a little bit of a different style.
It really reminded me of a children's book, and specifically of books like The Stinky Cheese Man.
Oh, I thought of exactly the same thing. It has that interesting kind of like, I don't know if you... how would you describe that?
Well, it was a combination of the textures and the little triangle noses and the kind of cutout elements of it, or that book by the same author about the big bad wolf. Those kinds of books. But definitely it's got the feel of a children's book. I'm probably connecting it with that one because that was one of my favorite children's books when I was growing up. But this could be the children's book of a new modern era on a tablet for some young person today.
Mm-hmm. And it is a totally child-appropriate game, but there is so much for adults to appreciate, too. I really think it's a fantastically produced game from an artistic standpoint. The Double Fine artists have just done a fantastic job. And also the music is really good. Apparently they had the soundtrack recorded by the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, which just sounds really lovely. It's a lot of just beautiful music to accompany the game.
Absolutely. And, along with the music, the dialogue was excellent. I think they had excellent voice acting for all the characters.
Yeah, it was really funny.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, to me, like, right off the bat, I started off as Vela, and the funniest thing on Earth to me was her grandmother.
Oh my, and her grandfather both.
The scenario for Vela that she's confronted with when she first wakes up is that she's being summoned by her little sister because it is, what do they call it? Maiden's Feast?
The Maiden's Feast.
Yes, and, when I heard the phrase Maiden's Feast, I pretty much assumed correctly that she was going to be eaten by some kind of dragon.
I was actually pretty surprised at that element. Very soon you discover that the tradition of the town, Vela lives in Sugar Bunting, which is a baking town, and one of the many things they bake are beautiful dresses for their maidens to wear, so that every 14 years, when the mysterious villain of the game, Mog Chothra, arrives.
A powerful and illustrious Grand Mog.
Oh yes, a Grand Mog. Every 14 years when Mog Chothra arrives, Mog Chothra will eat some of the maidens of the town, and therefore spare the rest of the town destruction. Pretty morbid, really, but actually treated with this reverence by all the characters. The grandmother is so excited about, oh, Mog Chothra is coming to, and it's such an honor that Vela will be chosen to be fed to Mog Chothra.
You kind of feel for this character who seems to be the only sane person in a mad world. I think that's really, both of the characters seem to be the only sane person in a world gone crazy.
Yeah.
Where for Vela, everyone seems to be just gleefully giving up their lives to this horrifying monster. And
all the other girls are overjoyed to be part of this,
competing to be eaten. And we don't want to get too far into that, because I feel like that those scenes that we would get into would definitely be diminished if they were spoiled for someone. So if you're... Personally, I think that if you are listening to this, Raygan is the final arbiter of spoilerdom, but I urge you to go ahead and play this game now if you're considering it. Go ahead and get right off. I'm going to give you a second.
You think it's time for the spoiler break?
I really think it's time for the spoiler break.
All right, let's hit the spoiler break. All right, so the spoiler break having passed, yes, so Vela is about to be eaten by Mog Chothra. She is seemingly the only person not totally excited by the concept of feeding the maidens of the town to this horrible beast. Although actually, like, it's striking how calm she is, which I thought was hilarious. It's not so much that she's horrified by the idea of dying or being eaten. It's more that she just thinks, this doesn't seem fair or right.
Wow, this sucks. This is dumb. Why aren't we fighting this thing?
Why don't we kill Mog Chothra? And that's what's really hilarious about her throughout the whole game, is she's so focused. She wants to kill Mog Chothra. Every character she meets, one of her dialogue choices is, so can you help me kill Mog Chothra? She meets the people in the Cloud City, Maryloft, and she, they're unrelated in any way, but she asks them, can you help me kill Mog Chothra? She meets a talking tree in the forest, and she asks the tree, hey, can you help me kill Mog Chothra? She's so focused, and every time that came up, I had a laugh, because it's great. Everything about Vela was really charming and fun.
I'm going to be happy when she finally kills Mog Chothra.
Well, if we're already past the spoiler break, we can...
Oh, okay. We can talk about it.
We can talk about it. She at halfway through the game, she finally gets to kill Mog Chothra, but we'll talk about that when we get to it.
And we haven't really spoken much about the other character, Shay.
My name is Shay, and this is my life on the incubator vessel Bassa Nostra. Teleporter, activate. It's a lifeboat, an escape pod. It carried me to safety when my world was dying. I can't really complain.
Hey, easy, computer.
The ship takes care of me.
Whole grain nutrient taste?
Feeds me. Entertains me. I think in its own weird way it loves me.
I know it's hard. You've given up so much.
Uh-huh. But I've discovered it's also lying to me.
Oh, honey, you can't come in here. I'm working on a surprise for you.
Sheltering me from the conflicts raging throughout the galaxy. The injustices out there that I could be fighting. But this ship would never let me put myself in danger.
What am I? Your prisoner?
Just until I'm sure you're safe.
So it's time for a mutiny. Time to put aside childish things. Time to grab the wheel of this ship and steer it straight into the storm.
I think some of my favorite elements of the game were Shay's plot. Even though I liked the characters better in the other plotline, really, because there's not many characters in Shay's plotline. Shay's plotline was very, very cool and interesting to me. He's living on this spaceship where all his needs seem to be taken care of. You get up in the morning, he's woken up by this sort of mother and father computer.
Yes, the AI of the ship is named Mom.
Yes, and it's a big sunny sun that just beams at him and tells him what a good boy he is. And the whole ship seems designed for taking care of a toddler. and he is,
a teenager.
I want to say in his teens, yeah. So he's clearly been living there for a long time. Like everything around him is like Playmobil. He eats with a talking spoon with a smiley face on it that talks to him about nutrition.
Reminds him to chew his food 32 times.
Yes. And, you know, he's sent on these missions by the computer that are just purely to keep him occupied. At first I thought, okay, what's he doing here? Like, what are these missions? But those scenes of the missions were just so hilarious to me. Like, he's sent off. You start off with a list of missions to choose from, and it's like, oh, there's something on the hull. What could it be? You go outside. Oh, it's a birthday present. Yay!
Yay!
Opens the box. Oh, it's a Grab and Gary. I'll put this with all my other Grab and Garys that I've received as birthday presents. Or there's an avalanche. We've got to save the villagers. Oh, turns out it's a ice cream avalanche. Yay!
And you've got to eat them out with your trusty spoon.
So the wonderful part of that to me is just how much it makes you want to rebel, which is a very teenage feeling. You really feel this character. He, much less than Vela, I feel like.
He's just bored.
He seems less driven than Vela. She's very clearly interested in overthrowing the, horrifying reign of Mog Chothra. He's just bored and kind of fed up and ready to get on with his life and do something important. And the interesting thing about it to me is, like, as you start to do that, you really start to question, like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, why on earth would they put a child in this machine to create boredom and to infantilize him for his entire life? It is very mysterious, but it's also just hysterical. His only interaction is with the other characters, the Yarn Pals, which are these very cute knitted creatures that he's constantly saving on his little quote-unquote missions. And, of course, the Space Weaver, which pilots his ship.
It seems like it's a very yarn-based technology on this spaceship.
Yeah, very strange world there. So Shay's plotline is essentially, first of all, him. You have to play through quite a bit of boredom with Shay. Now, it's all very funny and it's very amusing, but you're playing through some of the same missions and other things several times until finally something changes. So you essentially have to play all 4 of these missions and then start replaying them because there's nothing else to do. And the second time you play one of the missions where you have to stop a runaway train, which, of course, it's impossible not to stop the runaway train. But if you, out of sheer boredom, both as Shay's boredom and, in a way, your own player boredom, once you start trying to sabotage the missions and make them go wrong, then in the train mission, you can fail to save the train and fall to your quote-unquote death, and you land on a pile of very, very fluffy spikes. And it's at that point that you meet Merrick, who is this very mysterious and kind of sinister wolf, or perhaps person in a wolf suit, who lives in the bowels of the ship, and starts instructing Shay to do other more meaningful missions, which mostly involve rescuing quote-unquote creatures that you never actually see using the ship's grabby arm. Kind of a weird scenario, but essentially, Shay is overjoyed to finally have something that seems theoretically quote-unquote real to do, but is it? Ooh.
Yeah, and that's kind of the setup and the overall plot of the game. Out of all that, what puzzles really stood out to you? Because to me, the absolute best puzzle was the Maiden's Feast puzzle.
Right at the beginning?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I really enjoyed that moment. There was a lot to... although I did find it a little bit frustrating because at first I had a really hard time figuring out how to... Essentially, you're swapping items with the other girls who are waiting to be eaten by Mog Chothra, and I had a little bit of a hard time figuring out how to swap with people. You can drag your objects onto them, and they will exchange them with you for something else. And there were a few situations where you'd swap, and then they would give you your original item back, and other situations where they wouldn't. But overall, that was a pretty cool puzzle.
You know, and I thought that was more similar to your old school game of this genre. Like, it's a puzzle involving a lot of intricate exchanges and dialogue choices. The only thing that made it easy, like, this would have been the hardest puzzle in the game if these characters weren't all, like, glued in place on the same screen.
That's true.
So when you get to the next area with her, Bird Village,
Maryloft,
where the bird persons live.
It's Maryloft.
So when she visits Bird Village, she gets similar puzzles. It's an item exchanging puzzle, and she's got to get the shoes and she's got to get the eggs and this and that. But it's not as difficult a puzzle. There's fewer moving parts. There's fewer kind of possible wrong dialogue choices. But it's a much more time-consuming puzzle because of all the running back and forth. The first puzzle to me really encapsulates, like, this is what an adventure game's about.
I feel you, although I actually think I took a lot longer in Maryloft than I did in the initial town. And I think it was a little bit more complicated puzzle, but it was also a little less obvious in who you needed to talk to or what you needed to do. And there were some problems with it. Like, for example, in Maryloft, there's a part where you can get a peach that's part of... it's not actually part of any puzzles while you're in Maryloft. It's just this item. It's a peach that you can get from one of the trees, and it's a consumable. You can eat it. And there were several times throughout the game where I thought, maybe I'm supposed to eat the peach, or maybe I'm supposed to give the peach to someone, but you actually don't need it until much, much later in the game. And by that time, I had eaten the peach already. And it took me a very, very long time to figure out that you could go back to Maryloft, trek all the way back through the forest and up the ladder and all the way back to Maryloft and up to the tree and pick another peach because they're a renewable. And then trek all the way back down to the very end of the game again in order to use that peach in a much, much later puzzle. So there were a lot of little quirks to it like that. I wouldn't say it was at all hard. I would put it at some place between a game like Gone Home or the Walking Dead adventure games, which have very, very little in the way of puzzles, and kind of halfway between those and something more puzzle-oriented like the Monkey Island games, where you really did have to do quite a bit of puzzle solving.
You know, I have not actually gotten around yet to playing any of these Telltale games, and I'm just going to break for a moment to talk about that because they seem like a very different breed of adventure game. That's much more about character interaction and relationship than it is about puzzle solving.
Yeah, so different. If you have played games from Telltale in the adventure game genre, but not some of the older adventure games from LucasArts, then you're playing a pretty different style of game. Now, I think they're both going to appeal to you, but Telltale's games are all about making choices during the plot, usually in terms of dialogue choices. So, in the Walking Dead games, for example, your choices tend to be things like, do I go to save this character or go to save this character? Do I act friendly towards this character or do I tell that character off? And those choices have really interesting effects throughout the story, but essentially you're watching the story unfold and then jumping in at key moments to make quick decisions about which way it's going to go. You're almost never solving puzzles. I think the closest to a puzzle I remember solving in the Walking Dead games is in the very first scene. There's a quote-unquote puzzle where you have to find batteries to power a radio, and they're on the floor. Just look for them. They're right there. So there's not really much in the way of puzzle solving. Oh, and then of course you have to figure out which way the batteries go in. Plus side first or minus side first. It's really, really puzzling. So those games are more about directing a plot and choosing your characters interactions with other people rather than solving puzzles in order to advance the story. In the Telltale games, the story is going to advance whether you do anything or not, and you're just steering it.
Yeah, I think that's, like, in this kind of game, the puzzles are what restricts the flow of the plot, and the payoff is that the plot flows forward. And in those types of games, the plot flows forward whether you like it or not, and you're just along for the ride trying to direct it in a way that satisfies you.
Mm-hmm.
You have essentially no control over the plot in a traditional adventure game. It's just, it's going to happen as soon as you put the right object in the right person's hands.
Yeah. So both games have their merits, and I really, really love the Walking Dead games from Telltale, and I also really, really love this style of games. But yeah, they're different, and I think it's really fascinating how they've branched off. I also think in some ways they're different in terms of control. The Telltale games are really designed to be played on a console, so like they're probably their primary platform are things like the Xbox 360. And they really work well with a gamepad. Something about those games just clicks with a gamepad, because essentially you're presented with an option and you can press X to, do one thing, or, A to do something else. Whereas in Broken Age or some of the other point-and-click adventure games like this, you can use a gamepad, but you probably shouldn't, because essentially what you're doing then is using a gamepad as a mouse. If you can, just play it with a mouse, or hopefully, if it's out by the time that you hear this, play it on a touchscreen.
I would say touchscreen seems like definitely a natural fit for this game. So if by the time you're listening to this you have a chance to play it on a touchscreen, go for that. But it was extremely enjoyable on the computer, on my big, beautiful iMac. The art was just gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the ending of the game. What do you what did you make of it?
I suspected.
Okay, actually, before we say that, I should say that by the ending of the game, what I mean is the ending of part 1, because it's obvious that this was sort of a part of the structure of the game from the beginning, but essentially at the quote-unquote ending of part 1, or the middle of the game, the stories come into sync. And considering we're past the spoiler break, I can say that that's because you get the only moment in part 1 where the two characters are in the same place at the same time. When you kill Mog Chothra, it falls to the ground, and to explain how, when you've killed Mog Chothra because you have discovered that in the town of Shellmound, the next town over from yours, where you finally arrive, there is a temple to the Dead-Eye God, and when you enter the temple of the Dead-Eye God, you discover that the Dead-Eye God, many hundreds of years ago, was actually just a dude who's in a spaceship of some kind, perhaps one similar to Shay's, and he's crashed there on the planet that Vela inhabits, and he spent some time talking to the locals, but he wasn't able to repair his ship and take off, and so he just put himself into stasis. But when Vela arrives, she wakes him up, and she talks to him a little bit. He's a guy named Alex. He's somewhere in his 20s, I'd imagine. And Vela helps him repair his ship, and in exchange, he offers to use the power of his ship, some kind of laser beam or something, to help her take down Mog Chothra. So you do that, and Mog Chothra crashes to the ground on the beach in Shellmound, and out of Mog Chothra's mouth wanders a confused-looking Shay. And Shay and Vela sort of stare at each other for a moment, and through a moment of confusion, Vela ends up inside the ship, inside of, theoretically, Mog Chothra, and Shay is outside in Vela's world, and the door locks. And that's the ending of the game. And it raises more questions than it answers, but I will say I did find it satisfying, because I do feel like while it did sort of raise more questions than it answered, it sort of promised that there are answers. I don't think this is a, Lost situation. I think this is a game with answers.
I don't know, man. What are those numbers? But I think that, I really liked that, because I suspected that the ship was Mog Chothra, and the reason I suspected that was the art style really hinted at it through the hexagons.
I'm surprised you picked up on that. I did not.
The ship is hexagons top to bottom, and so are Mog Chothra's eyes. And so, to me, I was like, oh, I bet you. Because I actually thought that not while I was playing the game. I was playing it and then I took a break from it, and I kept thinking about it. I was like, what? How are these two characters connected? Are they in different realities? Are they in different times? Is the age broken somehow? But I thought about it. I was like, you know what? I bet you that Mog Chothra is not what he seems. And that's when I thought about it.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty excited when I realized that I was right.
Congratulations.
That was my aha moment. I didn't get the aha moment from the puzzle, so I might as well have gotten it there.
So then I suppose Merrick, down in the belly of the ship, was directing Shay to pick up maidens. Was that the action of the game?
On the little... what really confuses me is like why he needed this kid to do that at all, because it seemed like all he needed to do was press a button. It's like press A to pick up like weird Pokemon looking thing.
Yeah, which were in fact apparently on the outside maidens. I think that there's something more to it that we haven't seen there yet.
Yeah, like why does he want these maidens?
What is he doing with them?
Why is this ship eating people? Maybe it runs on people.
The maidens are quarantined inside the ship in a special room that you can see from the outside, but you don't get to go into from the ship. And so I think that perhaps we'll get inside there in part 2.
Yeah, hopefully we get into the room with the babes.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also clear that, first of all, in Vela's world, Mog Chothra is not the only Mog. And it's
they did say that.
It's also clear that in Shay's world, his ship is not the only ship. It's a part of something called Project Dandelion, which is mentioned once or twice. And also Alex mentions that his ship, I think, was part of Project Dandelion. So we don't really know what Project Dandelion was yet, but both Alex, the quote-unquote Deadeye god, who is about 14 years older than Shay, and the Mogs arrive about once every 14 years, and Shay himself, they're both a part of this project, Project Dandelion. Who knows what its purpose is? Hopefully we'll find out in part 2.
Faster than light travel is made possible by virgin blood.
Delicious. So yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. I'd say that the ending was satisfying, but it didn't really answer questions. I do think, though, that they did a really, really good job of making it feel complete enough that I could play it and feel good about waiting for part 2.
Now, I have a question about part 2.
Mm-hmm.
I bought part 1.
Mm-hmm.
Do I simply get part 2 when it comes out?
Yes, you do. So
I don't have to pay anything else or get it as a DLC or anything like that?
Yeah, so the way that they've structured this is not really like the way that Telltale does, which is... Actually, no, Telltale sells by the season, unless... I suppose it depends on what platform you're on. But they're not selling it as episodic content. When you buy the game today, you are not just buying part 1, you are buying the entire game. But you are getting part 1 now, and you will get part 2 immediately upon its release for free. Same goes for if you were a Kickstarter backer.
You'll get it when it's ready, and you'll like it.
Yeah. So I think that's a pretty good way of doing things, but it also kind of feels a bit like the model that a lot of games are using sort of post-Minecraft, this... what's the word they use for it on Steam? Early access. It's an early access game. And I'm not always a fan of that, but I think in this case it works because they're kind of skirting the line between early access and episodic content. And I played this and felt good about it. Whereas some early access games I've played and thought, well, this was an unfinished beta, and who knows if it'll ever be finished, and it was a waste of my time.
Yeah, I definitely... It's hard to know in a world where games are being released in this way if you're playing a game at the right time. So Minecraft is a good example. I started playing that a few years ago when it was relatively new, and it was a very simple game. And I left it. I came back to it. Later on, when I played it again, it was a much better game. Left it, came back to it again, played it, and I felt like it had become an overcomplicated game. So, where in that kind of a release structure, how do you gauge when to play or what to play? It makes the decision so much harder.
And how do you decide if it's a good game? Because there's the
by what yardstick at what time?
If I go to an early access game and I play it and I don't have fun, well, am I wrong for saying this is a bad game? Because you could just argue back, no, of course, it's an unfinished game.
Someone will definitely tell you you're wrong.
Of course. But, if I'm paying the price of admission and I'm playing a game, I expect to have fun. I think you've seen a lot of early access games kind of have this criticism. I think that's where they really did a great job. Here, you are getting as far as I can tell, 100% finished first act of the game.
Yeah. How much time did it take you to complete?
That's a good question. I would have to check my exact Steam time, but I think it was somewhere around 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
So I think it definitely falls within our length goals.
Yeah, about the same for me.
Mm-hmm. And I felt like it was a really complete game at that 3 or 4 hours. It told a really fascinating and interesting story. It had a lot of humor. I really enjoyed it. I did go back and play it mostly a second time through, just to kind of refresh my memory before we jumped on this podcast. And I still enjoyed it. I enjoyed playing through it a second time because I got to choose dialogue choices I hadn't seen before. Here's some really interesting new bits. What do you think were the themes of the story?
Oh, I'm always bad at this. You'll have to ask my English teacher. But I think that it's primarily to me a story of teenage rebellion. And so you've got rebelling against sort of the infantilizing of the computer and it directing every aspect of your life. And you've got Vela rebelling against the convention of, her whole, creepy the lottery style, everyone wants to murder you.
Yeah.
And so that was very effective to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then
they both shared that theme of essentially children growing up and rejecting the world that they've been presented with.
Yeah.
Trying to cast off the traditions and the plan that was set out for them.
I always kind of curious about like where titles come from. And this is a game where unless they reveal something in part 2, like I have no idea why they decided to call it Broken Age.
I'm really curious about that too. I think that initially I thought, oh, this is a fracture in time where these are two characters living on different planes of existence or different dimensions or in different eras or something. But no, it seems that they share the same world.
Yeah, that's what I thought at first. Maybe it'll turn out that the Broken Age is the teen age.
Perhaps so. The most fascinating thing I've heard or read about this was people talking about the game's take on sexism, which I think is totally valid. I think this game, in addition to being about sort of teen angst and rebelling against the world that's been planned for you by your elders, it's also sort of about institutionalized sexism, or at least Vela's story is. It's a story about a girl who's growing up in a society where, in the most literal possible sense, girls are being commodified. They are being turned into consumables for this creature.
Monster cakes.
I know. And I think it's in the most literal possible sense sort of about that, about rebelling against that, about rebelling against being seen as an object or being manipulated by the society around you. And I think it's fascinating how some of the characters completely buy into it, like Grandma totally buys into it, and yet other characters like Grandpa Beastender, which, by the way, is the greatest name because you get these hints. In fact, it's not so much a hint. Vela's grandpa, whose name is... I don't remember his first name now, but he was Grandpa Beastender.
Brommel Beastender.
Brommel Beastender. He says that Sugar Bunting used to be a town of warriors called Steel Bunting, and they were fighters. And she's clearly a chip off of his block from an older generation of fighters, but now they've settled into this complacent appeasement of the Mogs, and they're now feeding their daughters almost gleefully. It's sort of a Stockholm syndrome. They're no longer just appeasing the Mogs to save the town. It's become something that they celebrate culturally.
They have no shame.
None at all. And I think that sort of ties into the idea of it being about sort of sexism, because there's ways in our culture that we celebrate these totally sexist tropes or these totally sexist cultural traditions that, if you really stand back and look at them, are really just feeding girls to the machine. And I think that's a lens to look at the plot of this game through that's really interesting.
I didn't think about that at all, but it's an interesting way to look at it for sure.
It's a great game with a lot going on in terms of theme that you can appreciate on many levels, and I think that's one of them.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. If I replay it, it'll definitely be a new lens to look at it through.
My name is Valoria. People call me Vela.
Guess it's time to face the cupcakes.
Well, a lot of people call me traitor.
What if we fought the monster instead of feeding it?
The Grand Moggs have visited our lands for as long as anyone can remember. If you destroy the feast, Mog Chothra will destroy this village.
That's what I get for asking questions. Why did we willingly offer sacrificial maidens for that beast to devour? We were once a village of warriors. We had pride and honor.
This can't be right.
I hear him! I know that if I act on my instinct to fight, I would be putting my whole village in danger. So I'll ask a new question. Instead of, what if we fought the monster? What I want to know is, how do I kill it?
So where can people play this game?
People can play it. I picked it up on Steam.
As did I. Actually, I should say that I picked it up through the original Kickstarter campaign. So I received a Steam key and also a DRM-free copy. And I'm pretty sure if you prefer a DRM-free copy of the game, that you can still do that if you buy it through, I think, the Humble Store, or you may be able to buy it directly from Double Fine. So you could probably get the game DRM-free if you'd like.
I think this is just going to be one of those situations where I tell you, Google it.
Yeah, go Google it. You'll find it. And I'm pretty sure you can also get it on Mac, Windows, or Linux. The plan is clearly to have it also available on iOS, but as far as I can tell, I think that they're waiting until Act 2 is complete to release it on iOS. I think it seems that they're wanting to release it as a complete finished product on that platform.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, just to
release a complete game.
Yeah. But if you're willing, as I was, to jump into this game before it is entirely done, I think you are not going to be disappointed at all. I think you're going to have a great time, and you'll have something to look forward to later this year with the second act coming out.
So, to conclude, do you have anything on the horizon that you're excited about for upcoming gaming?
Oh, yes. Well, I should say that I've been playing a lot of Hearthstone on the iPad. It just came out for the iPad as we're recording this, although when you're hearing this, it's probably been out for a little while. And it is an absolutely fantastic translation of the desktop, PC, and Mac version of the game to iOS. I've rarely seen so polished a game on iOS. And so I've been working my way through that and trying to build up a deck. Haven't spent a dime on the in-app purchase element of the game yet, and I don't know if that's really going to be a big part of it for me. But considering how great and fun the game is and the way that it plays, I think this is a game that I would not mind paying money for these in-app card decks at all. I think it's really just a really, really well done game. I'm playing the hell out of that right now.
Yeah, it seems like an interesting game. It's by Blizzard, yes?
Yes, it's
related to World of Warcraft?
Yeah, it's themed with World of Warcraft characters, but it's a collectible card game in the vein of Magic the Gathering, but it has a bit of a deck building mechanic. You're collecting cards as you play to build onto your deck, although not really like Dominion style, more just like longitudinal, over time deck building. But it plays really quickly, and it's really, really easy to pick up. The rules are almost glaringly obvious. You can play one game of it and have a pretty good sense of all of the core mechanics. And then everything else is just sort of contextual. You can hold your finger down on any card and it will explain its basic rules to you in one sentence that's clear and simple to understand.
And that's a great kind of platform for the fact that it's now out on the iPad. I think this kind of game is a great natural fit for the iPad because it has that tactile feel of the cards, but the digital help that, a very structured, rules-based, turn-based game like this, it just works very well with. If you have ever played any of these Magic the Gathering or Pokemon or any of these collectible card games, I was initially, when I heard about these going digital, which so many of them, almost all of them now have, I was thinking to myself, could that really work, in a situation where it's not face-to-face with a deck of cards? And gosh, it just really does.
It's perfect. This is such a great platform for it because, first off, with physical cards, they can't just give you your starter deck for free, but with digital decks, they can get you started totally for free, and you can get a sense of whether the game is any good for free. And then you can earn cards for free as you play as well, which is the main way that you earn cards in Hearthstone. If you do feel like opening more booster packs more quickly, then you can do that, and it helps you build out your deck and explore things. But they've done some things that I thought were just really, really smart. One is that it seems like such an obvious thing in a game like this to include a card selling or trading mechanic to be able to exchange cards with your friends, but they have not included that. I think maybe because they were burned by the auction house mechanics on Diablo 3, or maybe just because they thought better of it. This is a game about getting cards that drop more or less randomly for you and you alone. So in a way, the card collection is more just about leveling up your character and being able to accomplish new things. It's not a marketplace where you have to think about the value of your cards. So I think that's
nice.
It really took some of the, I think, stress out of the game. You're not. I think that was a really wise decision on their part. And really, it's just so quick. The gameplay is quick. You're never making an agonizing choice. And each game against an opponent, whether you're playing against a real person over the internet or playing a practice game against the AI, the games never seem to take more than about 5 to 10 minutes. So it's really perfect game for mobile. So if you have an iPad, or I should say, I suppose, if you have an iPad that will run this, because I don't think it will run on the first generation iPad, and it may not run on the iPad 2. I haven't checked that. But if it will run on your iPad, there is no reason you shouldn't already have this. It's free. Try it out, and I think you'll love it.
All right. And now for me, the game I'm most excited about right now is Trine, and I'm going to make you play it with me immediately after this.
Shane and I are
playing
Trine 2, yeah.
I've got my wife in on the game. It's a great... One of the things that I love in games, a game that I always look for, is a cooperative game that allows both local and remote co-op.
And that's really hard to find.
That's pretty hard to find. Now, if that game is a puzzle platformer, just allow me to give you my money right now, because I love puzzle platformers. I love cooperative games. I love cooperative puzzle platformers. Really just scratches all of my biggest gaming itches. So I won't, rave too much about this game because I haven't gotten far enough into it to say if it's like the best thing ever or only something I'm really enjoying.
It's got a lot of charm, though. I think that the main thing that stands out about it to me so far is visually, it's really impressive for a sort of whatever you'd call it, 2.5D platformer. It's got a lot of really colorful, beautiful art, all three-dimensional, great lighting effects, great water effects. It's just a gorgeous looking game. And it's not a brand new game. It's one that you will see pop up on Steam sales and other things all the time. So Trine 2 is definitely a recommendation if you have a second or third person in your life to play the game with. And even if you don't, if you're playing it solo, you actually play as all three of the important characters by switching between the three in a really kind of fun character switching mechanic. Not quite a Lost Vikings kind of thing, but more a all 3 characters inhabit the same space, and you can transform into these 3 different character forms. So really cool game. Shane and I are going to play it right after we record this episode.
And you know what? Let's get off and do that right now.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us this week. Nate will be back next week as we talk about a game that we have been looking forward to recording a podcast about for ages. We're going to be talking about FTL, Faster Than Light. FTL, Faster Than Light is a game out on the PC, Mac, Linux, and now finally the iPad, and it is the perfect iPad game. FTL is an absolutely amazingly fun spaceship sim / roguelike / adventure.
No, don't spoil it.
It's
Don't
not
spoil
a spoiler, you horrible person. I love this game so much, and I'm so looking forward to this episode. So if you can, before now and the next try, check out FTL. It's a fantastic game, and it is available on a platform that you can run. I promise you that. So we're going to be talking about FTL next week, and specifically, we're going to be going into detail about FTL Strategy, because that's a game that you can pick up and complete each run of the game in probably 15 minutes to an hour. But in order to really do well at that game, you're going to need some tips. And fortunately, I'm not that great at it, but I've got 2 people with me, Shane and Nate, who are both pretty darn good at the game. So I'm really looking forward to hearing their tips.
I don't know about that. Hopefully we could just all share enough tips with each other that we can finally... one of us could be decent at this game.
Well, I'm expecting that you guys will improve my game in FTL pretty significantly just by telling me all of your tips. So I can't wait.
Yeah.
This has been a great episode of The Short Game. You can follow our show on Twitter @_shortgame, or you can find the show notes and all of the details of our upcoming episodes and listen to our past episodes at www.theshortgame.net. I've been Raygan Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter @RayganK, spelled RayGanK. And Shane?
I am and continue to be Shane Kelly, and my Twitter handle is @8bitshane.
And I can't wait to chat with you again next week. Hopefully Nate will be back from his long trip and his super awesome rock show, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon.